Welcome to Mokena's Front Porch, a Mokena history podcast with Matt Galick and me, Israel Smith. This episode is on Mamie Bechstein Miller, who was a teacher at the old Schoolhouse school, as well as principal there.
That is true. Yeah.
We had a little something different we're doing this episode. So,
Sure.
As we've done in the past, Matt wrote a great blog article about her, and we'll go through that. But we had a nice surprise. Dr. Cohen, who's the school district 159 superintendent, found an old recording of Mamie Bechstein Miller. And so we actually were able to record that, include that as part of this, as well as have a conversation with Dr. Cohen, talk a little bit about how he happened to come about this and find this recording, this tape. And Matt, tell us why that's significant, kind of, for one, who she was, maybe a little better picture, and why it was so neat to you. You were so excited to hear about this recording.
Yeah. Oh, where do I start? Well, first of all, to give a little bit of background on Mamie Bechstein, she, of course, longtime Mokenians will recognize her last name, as it's a very old Mokena family. Has lived here. I believe, I want to say the Bechsteins got here towards the end of the 1840s, I believe. So in any case, they predate the railroad and Mokena. But in any case, Mamie was one of the few people in Mokena in her time and place who was able to get a college education, very unusual for a woman in the period in which she would have been going to school. So this is kind of like the late 1890s. She became a teacher in the rural schools of Will County, but eventually she made her way back here to Mokena, got a job working at the Mokena School, which, as we know, the lovely grand old schoolhouse that used to stand on Front Street and Schoolhouse Road. And she taught there and eventually got herself a job working there as a principal for a few years there in the early 1900s. And in the course of my research and my exploring through Mokena's history, I always knew who Mamie Bechstein was and was familiar with her immediate family, her parents, grandparents, etc. And I had always known that a recording was made of her talking about her time teaching at the Mokena School and being principal of the Mokena School. It was made when she was 99 years old. So this recording was made in 1979. And I had always sort of thought that, well, I'm sure it's long gone because I never happened across it. Just thought it was kind of lost to time. She did have a family, but her immediate family went out west. Mamie she later got married and became Mamie Miller. She spent the last years of her life out in Colorado. So they kind of all were out there. I thought, okay, well, the family's probably got it. Who knows if I'm ever going to hear this? But when we were communicating with Dr. Cohen, it just sort of came up in passing that he had this tape. And I was absolutely flabbergasted, that a copy of it existed, but that it was right here in Mokena this whole time.
And had just been kind of sitting in a box with other historical stuff. They weren't neglecting it, but nobody knew it was there. No, there was no digital recording of it yet.
Right. And it's so significant for us, kind of like for two reasons. It's the voice of a Mokenian who was born in the 19th century, who was born in 1880 on her family farm, on her parents' farm on what is today LaPorte Road, who grew up in Mokena, spent a good part of her time, of her life here. So it's not every day you get to hear a Mokenian talking about her life here, who was born in 1880. And it's also significant because it's the only publicly available recording of someone describing life at the school, at the old school. Over the years, I've known people from town, Mokenians, who went to that school. and shared their memories with me. But unfortunately, they're deceased, and I really cannot think of anybody that I'm aware of that's still around who would have went to that school, because it was went defunct in 1929. So the fact that we have her recording and we can listen to Mamie Bechstein talking about the Mokena school, and just pop it in whenever we want is really just miraculous, I think.
Absolutely. And, I think we'll absolutely say thank you to Dr. Cohen and the 159 School District for sharing that recording with us. We're excited to be able to put it on here. There are definitely parts of it. Again, she was 101? Was she 100?
She was just short of her 100th birthday. She would have been about 99. She passed away when I believe she was 101 when she passed away.
Okay. So she's very along in age at this time.
Oh, yeah.
And you can tell it in her voice. So we're going to post the transcript as well, which we got from the school. And so that is a lot easier to follow along and understand what she's saying. But really a cool piece of history, a great find for us, and for really great of the school district to let us be a part of this. So,
absolutely.
And we look forward to doing more with Dr. Cohen and some of the history of the school. Matt, anything more you want to add about Mamie Bechstein?
Of course, we have our story of her life and everything in this episode. But if anyone visits my blog and goes back to that article that I wrote about her, you'll see a photo of her as she looked in her college years. So you can kind of see, okay, that's about how she would have looked when she was teaching here in Mokena.
And we'll definitely leave the link to that in the show notes, as always, so be sure to check that out. Sure. All right, Matt, thank you for this,
Absolutely.
And let's get into this episode.
When extolling the benefits of living in Mokena, one of the first points arrived at are the village's schools. Known throughout Chicagoland for their sterling quality, Mokena is right to boast of our schools. For all of the laurels they've brought to our community, the schools never would have amounted to anything if it wasn't for those who taught in and oversaw them. One such individual, whose name shines upon the record of our ears, is Mamie L. Bechstein, teacher and principal of the Mokena Public School. Maria Louise Bechstein's life began outside Mokena on July 11th, 1880, having likely first seen the light of day on her father's farm, a wide, sprawling estate whose homestead stood at what is today's intersection of LaPorte Road and Kirkstone Way. As she grew up, her friends and family all knew her as Mamie. Her roots in the community were well planted, as all four of her grandparents were German immigrants to the Mokena area in the days before the Civil War. Her mother was born Ida Schmuel, and her father, Christian Bechstein, was a prominent citizen who would come to wear many hats in the Mokena of his day, including that of mayor of the village from 1896 to 1903, as well as being one of the founders of the Mokena State Bank in 1909. As a young girl, Mamie Bechstein was educated at the Mokena Public School, a brisk walk over country roads from her parents' farm, the edifice having stood on the northwest corner of today's Front Street and Schoolhouse Road, which would later take the name of the landmark. Built 8 years before Mamie's birth, the stately two-story wooden structure was considered one of the finest schools in all of Will County. During her time there as a pupil, Mamie's teacher was Mary Jane Cunningham, who she'd later note with a touch of mischief and a hint of spice that we had words. Around 1895, the Bechsteins moved to town, with her father still maintaining ownership over their farms, buildings, and acreage. At a time when few went to college, Mamie continued her studies at the Illinois State University at Normal and graduated in June 1903. By the next year, she was teaching in the small coal mining town of Minonk in central Woodford County. At some point in this era, she returned home and began teaching at her alma mater, the Mokena School, and by 1907 was working in its primary department. In May 1910, Mamie Bechstein moved up the school's ladder when the Board of Education hired her as principal to replace I.O. Sinclair while receiving $90 a month for her duties. While she now had an important administrative position, she still stayed true to her roots and taught the combined 5th through 8th grades at the school, which was made up of 52 pupils in one room. In her words, she handled the entire approach with no help. There was no opportunity for high school education in Mokena in those days, so students would commute elsewhere for this level of schooling, at this time usually to Blue Island. Mamie's world as an educator in the grand old schoolhouse is one that would be totally unrecognizable to Mokenians of today. The school's bell, perched high in its tower, played an integral role in the day. At 8:30 a.m., a half hour before the start of the school day, Mamie would ring it around 10 times with a thick rope that took quite a jerk to use. She'd also summon her pupils back to class with 2 or 3 rings after recesses at 10:30 and 3:30, and also to herald the end of the day at 4 p.m. with 3 or 4 strokes. The entire building was heated by coal in her time, with the stove's fires in the school being started every morning by their janitor, while Mamie fed continually throughout the day from buckets. Each floor had one big classroom, in which the pupils sat in bench seats, coming to the front of the room when they were asked to recite an answer. Also at the front of each room was a platform upon which stood the teacher's desk. In early December 1911, calamity befell Mamie when she contracted a debilitating illness, which one account describes as malaria, while another calls it typhoid pneumonia. Being confined to her home in town, her class at school was canceled until her younger sister Alice, herself a teacher, could fill in for her. Just before New Year's, Mamie's students showered her with Christmas postcards. Almost a year later, just before Christmas 1912, she resigned due to the untimely passing of her mother. History hasn't recorded if she continued to teach after she left the Mokena school, but it appears that she left the profession when she married Owen Miller of Iowa around 1919, it being common in those days for teachers to be single women. This union was graced by the arrival of a daughter, Edith Jane, around 1922. Over the years, Mamie and her family lived in various places around the country, such as San Diego, Cincinnati, and later Boulder, Colorado. She could rightfully claim many addresses over her long life, but she always considered Mokena her home, and so it was that her mortal remains were interred here at St. John's Cemetery when she passed away at the venerable age of 101 in November 1981. The Mokena schools of today serve as a living testament to the labors of Mamie Bechstein and of those who came before and after her. While our Mokena is one that would be unrecognizable to her and her students, she was part of a long and time-honored tradition in our community.
Wow, yeah, what a contribution she made at a time when
definitely
Mokena was much different than it is today.
Absolutely.
Do you know, was she the first? Would she have been the first female principal of a Mokena school, or do you know if there were?
Let's see. I'm trying to remember because there were female teachers before her, going all the way back to the time of the construction of the school in 1872. But if any of them made it to principal, that I'm not sure offhand. It could very well be. Also, maybe not, because in the news reportage that talked about her having been promoted to principal, it didn't really make a big deal of the fact. And part of me thinks that maybe the Mokena correspondent who took our news and was reporting it in the Joliet papers might have noted that fact, that she was the first lady principal. But to answer your question, I'm not sure on that.
Okay.
If she was the first or not.
It's interesting to see the difference of, the responsibilities of a teacher back then. Not only was she principal and teacher to 52 kids in 5th through 8th grade.
Right.
She also got to keep the fires burning in the winter.
Yeah, she did all right. Yeah.
The coal going. Mamie's father was the mayor of our town for a period.
Yes, he was.
So
Absolutely.
I think you said it was 1896 to 1903.
Yes.
What do we know of anything of significance that was going on, or what was going on in Mokena at that time?
Yeah, probably the most significant thing that happened under Mayor Bechstein's administration was the construction of the first water tower, which was completed in 1898 and stood just behind or immediately north of what is today the ESDA building, Emergency Services.
Yeah, right on Front Street.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. So that was for all the things that he accomplished during his time in office. The water tower was probably the.
So why? Maybe you can explain why that was so significant to the people at the time.
Yeah, primarily for fire protection. That's why it was built to have a bigger, more centrally located source of water in case of fire. Because prior to the construction of the water tower, there were a couple kind of big-sized wooden water tanks on Front Street. I don't get the impression that they were necessarily tall, but there were a couple of them on Front Street that could be tapped into in case of fire.
And was that the same tower that stood there until it was taken down in the 80s, was it?
Yes, that's correct.
Same one. Wow.
Yeah, so the tower was taken down in 1984, so it would have been 86 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, so it stood for quite a long time.
So he left office in 1903. Do we know anything more about him after that? Was he in town? Did he leave Mokena?
He stayed in town. He lived in town all the way until he passed away in the 1920s. That must have been around 1921 or 22, thereabouts. His home still stands. A pretty stately home for Mokena standards too. You really can tell that he was he and his family were people of means, but it was the house that is now standing on First Street and Mokena Street on the northwest corner. Two-story kind of Queen Anne style
beautiful
construction.
House.
Yeah. So that was the Bechstein house. That's where they built that house when they came off the farm and spent the rest of their time in Mokena. Aside from being a farmer, Mr. Bechstein was also a cattleman. He sold cattle, bought and sold cattle, transported them over the railroad and stuff like that. So
when they built the house, was the bank already? Did he already have the bank at that point?
Probably not. The house, I'm not sure the exact date the house was built. If I had to guess, I'd probably say it was in the 1890s sometime, based on the style in which it's built. You can kind of get some clues from that. But the bank wasn't built until 1909. But it was almost literally a stone's throw from home.
That's a great commute.
Yeah, for Mr. Bechstein.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
And where was Mamie living when she passed away?
Oh, good question. Not in Mokena. I believe, was it in California maybe? I'm not sure. Out of state in any case, because they kind of lived various places across the country after they moved out of Mokena, or after she moved out of Mokena. But yeah, she was out of state, I believe, or maybe it was in Boulder. Now I can't make up my mind. In any case, it was out of state and not close.
But she still wanted to come back and be buried here at St. John's Cemetery.
That's right. Yeah,
that's where her family is as well.
Exactly. Yeah, her parents, grandparents on both sides of her family, and cousins are there as well. Yeah, lots and lots of extended family members. She's up in the Bechstein family plot up there.
Well, one day we'll do a cemetery walkthrough, and I think that would be a really interesting kind of thing to get maybe like little snippets of history and then tie all these back to these people we've talked about.
I would love to
over these past episodes. I think to me that would be very interesting.
Sure,
but maybe I like cemeteries more than other people.
Yeah, no, it's a great place to be face to face with history. That's for sure.
So Mamie Bechstein is a great story. Talking about again, like the history, the teachers of our town play such a huge role.
Yes, they
whether it was back then or even today. So We say thank you to all you teachers that are willing to do that.
Yes.
I understand from the COVID years where we had to have our son at home during school that this is not something that I've chosen as a career.
No, yeah, definitely not.
And I appreciate all of those that do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Matt, anything else you wanna add about Mamie Bechstein?
No, just that one thing maybe. Yeah, if you're interested more in her, to check out my blog post, which was essentially the same thing we just went over, because there is a photo of her on there that was from her college yearbook.
Yeah, we'll absolutely be sure to share the link to this blog post in our show notes, as well as the pictures that we talked about here. And yeah, there's a very nice picture from Mamie Bechstein's senior year at Illinois State University in 1903.
Yeah, a while back.
And then as well as the picture of the old Mokena school on Front Street. That was there from 1872 to 1929, which is also included in the story. All right, Dr. Cohen, thank you for meeting with me today. We are going to talk about Mamie Bechstein and her long history in Mokena as part of the school system and the school district here in its early days. So can you just talk a little bit about how you came upon the stuff that you found?
Sure. Had the occasion to try and look up some financial records and went to an archive room in the Mokena Elementary School that was built in the 60s. So the north part of Mokena Elementary today, that was connected to the Willowcrest School in the 90s. In that archive room, we came across several boxes of records, old student registers, so attendance records going back to the 1880s, a lot of photo albums, but then came across a box with some CDs and floppy disks and even a cassette. And on the cassette was written Mamie Bechstein Miller, 1979, October 1979. I didn't have a frame of reference for who that was at the time. But then as we brought some of those historical items up to the district office, we began going through some of the photo albums which we have in the district office. Some are photos, some were just really well preserved newspaper articles from different events in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And one of the articles I came across was from 1979 that explained that the recording of Mamie Bechstein Miller was being played at a ceremony inside of Mokena Junior High, which at the time was Mokena Intermediate School, located on 195th Street. When the bell that was an old school bell was given back to the school district after it was being found in a fire department building. The bell was originally forged in 1881, and it sat at the top of Mokena, their elementary school located at Schoolhouse and Front Street. That school closed in 1929 and was torn down. The bell was preserved and disappeared for a very long time. The bell was housed indoors in Mokena Junior High for about 6 years, and then in 1985 was given its current home outside of Mokena Intermediate School, located in a structure adjacent to the playscape. Also in that photo album was an article from 1985 explaining how the district employees at the time who built that were set out to basically recreate, in a way, the belfry of the 1880 school. So it does look like it did back over 100 years ago.
Yeah, and she was instrumental in kind of giving some history on the bell, isn't that right?
Yeah, so when the recording of her voice was made, it was made in October of 1979. She was 99 years old. She was born in 1880. She was a student, a teacher, and a principal in that building prior to its closure in 1929. So the recording itself was made 50 years after the school closed, and Miss Miller was probably one of the few people who actually has a recollection of what school life was like in that small 4-room schoolhouse at the time.
Because she was also teaching she was the principal as well as teaching up to 52 fifth through eighth graders in one room.
That is correct.
Which is, I mean, God bless her. So, as you said, the school stood until 1929. It was built in 1872. And Mamie herself was born, the farm she grew up on was right around Kirkstone and LaPorte, which is close to the junior high building now over there. Mm-hmm. If not, probably part of the farm, you know. So, and also her father was a well-known businessman and a mayor in town for 7 years. So it was really interesting. Matt couldn't be here today, but he was very excited to hear the story because he's the article that we did this episode on is, based all on her. And so when we heard about this recording, or you're kind enough to share that you had this recording, Matt was more than excited to hear it. And so we're excited to include it as part of the podcast as well. So anything else that you'd like to add about her? Or I know that there's a ton of stuff that, you're able to pull out and show a little bit, which I think we'll try to incorporate in another episode, some of the great history you have here about the Mokena schools. But is there anything else you'd think of that you want to add that might be relevant?
I will say that there were a lot of efforts made to preserve the history by, different principals, superintendents going all the way back to Ray Garitano back in, 1985 when the current structure of the house, the school bell was built. Preserving that history of what Mokena was going all the way back to the 19th century has been important to a lot of people. So I'm just happy to carry on the tradition.
Well, and, clearly you have a passion for the history of this as well. So that goes hand in hand with the preservation and passing it down to others. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing this recording with us, and looking forward to getting more into all this other historical information that you have here. Thanks, Dr. Cohen.
Mamie Bechstein Miller, District 159, Principal of the Mokena Public School. 1910 to 1912. The school had 2 rooms. The lower grades on the lower floor. The upper grades, the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and some children taking advanced work on the 2nd floor. At that time, I had 52 pupils. I taught the entire groups with no help. I rang the bell at 8:30 and gave about 8 to 10 strokes. At 9 o'clock, we opened school. And I gave it 3 or 4 strokes. At recess, at 10:30 to 10:45, I rang it again. Give it 2 or 3 strokes. At noon, at 1 o'clock, I again rang it and gave it 3 or 4 strokes. At 3:30 to 3:45, we had recess. I'd call the children in and give it 3 or 4 slopes at the end of the day. The bell had a rope ends thing, and it took it quite a jerk to ring it. The spoon was heated with coal. We had a janitor that swept the rooms and built the fires. And during the day, I used coal that was stored in buckets. The rooms were about 20 by 60 feet. And we could seat 60 children in the upper room and about 50 in the lower room. In front of the room there's a platform, and on that platform stood the teacher's desk. Go! And we had class seats, and when a class presented, they came to the front of the room. Before we had no school lunches, the children just brought their own lunch. Some brought it in buckets and some brought it in their pockets. I entered the school at 6 years, and I left the school shortly before I was 18. We continued to work a little high school work, and in my case, I got my teacher's certificate.
Who was your teacher?
But M.J. Cunningham. He was the first one that really organized the school that we had grades. In 1908, the legislature passed a bill that if a child wanted to get a high school education, that the district had to pay the tuition, which caused a complete change in the teaching of those schools. After that, the children that wanted to attend high school had a chance, and they did. The children from Mokena used to attend the Blue Island High School. And of course I did away with all this work beyond the grades. After that, the children attended school were the regular normal age. It changed the entire system. After the school was built, the land was cheap, and we had a very small playground which almost was sort of no noise to the teachers and also to the kids. They crossed the road, and there was some vacant railroad property across the road, and that's where the children played ball.
What kind of ball?
Oh, baseball. If a train came along and they lost the ball, then I was to pay for the ball. Kept the children off of the tracks. And Mr. Pett, I say that the girls played drop back, Jeff, and cracked the whip.
What was crack the whip?
Children used to line up, and then the one at the end used to yank the children, and you know, most of them fell off. The schools ran from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m.
How far did the children have to walk to go home?
Well, some of them walked 2 miles. Schools were much better after children were given a chance to go to high school. Penmanship at that time was very important. I taught penmanship the last period of the week on Friday. Sometimes exchange it for art. I got $90 a month, which was considered a very high wage at that time.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you're enjoying our show, it would really help us out a lot if you would leave us a rating and a review, especially on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as well as share our show with your friends and your family. If you have any ideas for a show or have any questions we can try to answer, please send us an email at MokenasFrontPorch@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you and hopefully answer your question on the show. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Mokena's Front Porch.